Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA Karen Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, this HOA board member on my street thought her little title gave her more power than the police. She demanded to inspect the inside of my house, accused me of illegal renovations, and when I refused, she tried to get me arrested. This phone call was the worst idea of her life because she had no clue that I had something that ruined her entire story. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is from the subreddit r/ohnoconsequences and is titled HOA Karen told cops to arrest me for not letting her inspect my house. So my wife and I moved into our new HOA neighborhood a while ago. The house was absolutely perfect for us. It had a big backyard for our dogs, a nice open kitchen, and it was in a great location for our commutes. We did our research before signing the papers and the neighborhood rules seemed very standard and completely reasonable. And yeah, it all seemed very manageable, and for the first few months everything was completely fine. The neighborhood was quiet and our neighbors were very friendly. The HOA president, a very relaxed guy who lived down the street from us, actually came over to welcome us to the neighborhood when we first moved in. He told us that the board mostly just existed to maintain the community pool and handle the landscaping for the common areas. He made it very clear that they were not interested in micromanaging anyone, and we felt like we had dodged a massive bullet and found a great place to live in. Famous last words. Unfortunately, every neighborhood seems to have that one person who has to ruin the peace for everyone else, and in our neighborhood, that person was a woman on the HOA board who I will just refer to as the HOA Karen of this story, or the Karen, and she was not the president. She was just a regular board member, but you would think she was the supreme ruler of the entire development based on how she acted. We started noticing her behavior pretty quickly. She would go on these daily patrols around the neighborhood, and she didn't walk a dog, she didn't even jog for exercise. She simply walked very slowly up and down the sidewalk, staring intently at everyone's property. She carried a little notepad with her and would constantly stop to write things down. My wife and I joked that she was the neighborhood watch, but it quickly became apparent that she was just incredibly nosy and deeply entitled. The first time I actually interacted with her was when I was watering the front lawn. I had a standard green garden hose out on the grass, and I just turned the water off and was about to coil it up. She marched right up my driveway and stood there with her hands on her hips, and she loudly cleared her throat to get my attention. I turned around and said hello, trying to be polite to my new neighbor. She didn't say hello back though. Instead, she pointed at my garden hose and informed me that hoses must be completely concealed from street view at all times, and she said she was giving me a verbal warning, but that next time she would be issuing a formal fine. I was a bit taken aback because I was literally standing right there actively using the hose. I calmly explained that I was just finishing up and was about to put it away. She rolled her eyes in a highly exaggerated way, and she told me that excuses don't matter to the board and that I needed to respect the rules of the community. She spoke to me like I was a misbehaving child. I decided not to argue with her because it was not really worth the headache. I just smiled, coiled up the hose, and put it in the garage. And by the way guys, not gonna lie, I wish OP would have taken that garden hose and sprayed Karen full on in the face. That would have been an epic moment. And by the way, if you still enjoy these crazy HOA stories, then please don't forget to like the video, post some star emojis in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for your support. Anyway, that interaction left a bad taste in my mouth. I went inside and actually read through the neighborhood rules again just to be sure. And yeah, there was absolutely nothing in the document about garden hoses needing to be concealed while actively in use. She was completely making things up just to exert power over someone. A few weeks later, she tried to start trouble with my next-door neighbor over a potted plant on their porch. She claimed the pot was the wrong color. However, my neighbor just ignored her and went inside. It became very clear to everyone that this woman viewed herself as basically untouchable. She truly believed that being on the board gave her the ultimate authority to dictate how everyone else lived. Things finally reached a boiling point when my wife and I decided to do some minor cosmetic updates to our house. How dare you! We were just repainting the guest bathroom and replacing some light fixtures in the hallway. It was all internal work, it didn't even require any permits, and it definitely didn't require any approval from the neighborhood board. We bought our supplies and spent a weekend working on the house. The HOA Karen must have seen us carrying paint cans from our car into the house. In her twisted mind, this clearly meant that we were conducting major, unauthorized structural renovations. So the following afternoon, I was just sitting in my living room watching television, my wife was in the kitchen making lunch, and I heard a loud, aggressive pounding on the front door. It was not a normal knock. It sounded like someone was trying to break the door down. I got up and opened the door, and the Karen was standing there on my porch. She looked extremely smug and very impatient. She had her little notepad in one hand and her phone in the other. Before I could even say hello, she shoved her way forward, attempting to step past me into my house. I quickly shifted my weight and blocked the doorway with my body, and I asked her exactly what she thought she was doing. She huffed and looked at me like I was the most irritating person on the planet, and she announced that she was there to conduct an interior inspection of my property. She stated that she had seen us bringing construction materials inside and that she needed to verify that we were not knocking down load-bearing walls or doing unapproved plumbing work. I honestly thought she was joking for a second. I let out a short laugh and told her that we were just painting a bathroom. I told her she absolutely was not coming inside my house, and she didn't like that answer at all. Her face turned bright red and she raised her voice and told me that I didn't have a choice. She loudly proclaimed that as a sitting member of the board, she had the absolute authority to enter any house in the neighborhood at any time to ensure compliance with the community guidelines. Suffice to say, I stared at her in disbelief and I told her that was completely insane and legally completely false. I calmly informed her that she had no right to enter my private property and that she needed to leave my porch immediately. I gave her a very clear warning. I told her that if she didn't step back, I would consider her to be trespassing. She just scoffed loudly and told me that I was being ridiculous and that I couldn't deny her entry. She claimed she was going to write me up for a massive fine for obstructing a board member. I then told her to go ahead and write whatever she wanted in her little notebook, but she was not stepping foot inside my home. I then gently but firmly closed the front door right in her face and locked the deadbolt. I walked back into the kitchen and told my wife what had just happened. We both just shook our heads at the sheer audacity of this woman. We figured she would just go home and write a nasty email, but we were very wrong. About 20 minutes later, I saw flashing lights through the living room window. I looked outside and saw a police cruiser parked right in front of my driveway. The Karen was standing on the sidewalk next to the car, speaking very animatedly to a police officer, and she was pointing aggressively at my house. I opened the front door and walked out onto the porch. The police officer walked up my driveway, followed closely by the highly smug HOA Karen. She had this triumphant look on her face, clearly believing that she had just won the lottery of neighborhood disputes. She truly thought the police were about to kick my door down and drag me away in handcuffs so she could inspect my bathroom paint job. The police officer approached me and asked if I was the homeowner, and I confirmed that I was. He looked very tired and a bit confused. He explained that they had received a call from this woman claiming I was conducting illegal, dangerous construction in my home and that I was aggressively preventing a neighborhood official from doing her lawful duty. I kept my voice completely calm and professional, and I explained the reality of the situation to the officer. I told him that my wife and I were simply painting a bathroom. And I explained that this woman was a neighbor who was on the local board and that she had shown up at my door demanding to come inside my house to inspect it, and I told the officer that I'd refused her entry and simply closed the door. Karen immediately interrupted me. She started yelling that I was lying and hiding something, and she told the officer that the community bylaws clearly stated that board members have the right to inspect properties to ensure compliance. She demanded that the officer arrest me for obstruction and force me to let her inside. The officer held up a hand to stop her from yelling. He turned to her and asked her a very simple question. He asked if she had a warrant or something, and she looked totally confused. She sputtered for a second and said that she did not need a warrant because she was on the HOA board. The officer let out a long sigh. He explained to her very slowly and clearly that being on the neighborhood board does not override the law. He told her that she's a private citizen and she has absolutely no legal authority to demand entry into someone else's private home without their consent. Period. She started to panic and she realized things were not going her way. She tried to backtrack and claim that she had paperwork to prove her authority, and this was the perfect moment for me to provide the receipts. I pulled out my phone. I'd already pulled up the digital copy of our neighborhood rules and guidelines. I walked down the steps and politely showed my screen to the officer, and I told him that I'd reviewed the entire document and there was absolutely no clause, rule or guideline that allowed for interior inspections by board members under any circumstances whatsoever. I also mentioned to the officer that I had a doorbell security camera that had recorded the entire interaction of her trying to shove her away into my home after I told her no, and I offered to show him the footage. The officer nodded and looked at Karen, and he asked her if she had tried to force her way into my house, and she completely lost it. She started stammering and changing her story, and she claimed that I was being aggressive, and she claimed that she was just trying to do her job to protect the property values of the neighborhood. She started crying, genuinely shedding tears, playing the victim, and she wailed about how hard she works for the community and how disrespectful everyone is to her. The officer was completely unamused. He didn't buy her tears for a single second. He told her in a very firm, authoritative tone that she was completely in the wrong here. He informed her that calling the emergency line because a neighbor would not let her inside their house to look at paint was a massive waste of police resources, and he gave her a very stern warning. He told her that if she ever stepped foot on my property again, or if she ever called the cops for a non-issue like this again, he would personally ensure that she was cited for trespassing and for making a false police report, and she stood there basically with her mouth hanging open. The shock on her face was absolute perfection, and she had completely believed her own delusions of grandeur, and reality had just crashed down on her in front of everyone. The officer apologized to me for the disturbance and told me to have a good day and walked back to his cruiser. The Karen stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, clutching her little notepad. A few of the other neighbors had come outside to see what the commotion with the police car was all about, and they were all standing on their porches or in their yards watching her, and she realized she now had an audience. She turned bright red, put her head down, and practically ran back to her own house. I went back inside and immediately sat down at my computer. I drafted a very professional, highly detailed email to the actual HOA president, and I laid out the entire sequence of events. I explained how the HOA Karen had attempted to force entry into my home, how she had falsely claimed that she had the authority to do so, and how she had wasted police resources by trying to have me arrested for painting my own bathroom. I attached a video clip from my front door camera that clearly showed her aggressive behavior and my polite refusal, and I stated clearly in the email that my wife and I felt harassed and unsafe with this woman acting in an official capacity. I requested that the board address this immediately, and the president of the board called me less than an hour later, and he sounded completely horrified and deeply apologetic. He told me that the board had never authorized any sort of inspection and that they don't even care about interior paint, and that she was acting entirely on her own insane whims, and he assured me that this was completely unacceptable behavior and that they would handle it. Well, soon after, the HOA board called a meeting at the community center. My wife and I attended, and along with several other neighbors who had witnessed a police incident or who had their own personal grievances with Karen, and the meeting was just incredibly satisfying. The president took control of the room and he addressed the situation head-on. He didn't yell, but he was incredibly firm. He stated that a member of the board had severely overstepped their boundaries, engaged in harassment, and misused police resources under the false guise of neighborhood authority. He then publicly asked for Karen to resign from her position on the board effective immediately, and she tried to defend herself. She stood up and tried to give a speech about property values and community standards. She really tried to play the victim again, claiming that she was just misunderstood and that I was the one who was being hostile, but nobody in the room bought it. Several other neighbors started speaking up, sharing their own stories of how she had harassed them over minor, completely fabricated issues. The whole room completely turned against her. Seeing that she had absolutely no support, she had a complete meltdown and she yelled that none of us appreciated her hard work. Well, at least she's right about something there. She then grabbed her purse and stormed out of the community center, slamming the door behind her. The board officially voted to remove her from her position right then and there, and they also issued her a formal warning that any further harassment of residents would result in serious fines and potential legal action from the association itself. It has been several months since that incident, and the neighborhood has been incredibly peaceful. Karen still lives here, but she completely avoids everyone. She doesn't go on her daily patrols anymore, and she keeps her head down when she gets her mail. The current HOA board is fantastic and actually focuses on things that matter, like keeping the pool clean and organizing community barbecues. It's incredibly satisfying to know that her own arrogance and entitlement were exactly what caused her to lose the tiny amount of power she valued so much. She truly thought she could do whatever she wanted, and she found out the hard way that the real world does not work like that. And now guys, I want to share my opinion about this story. So to be honest, there's no version of this where letting a random HOA board member into your home was reasonable in any way. I mean, HOA board member is not really a job title with legal powers. As far as I know, it's usually like a volunteer position, and by the way, not the good kind of volunteer, for managing stuff like pool chlorine, mulch, and that kind of stuff. So HOA Karen has like the same authority to enter your house as the guy who delivers you pizza, which is to say, basically zero. And honestly, the board handled this much better than most HOAs would. Removing her was the right move for sure, and if anything, OP probably saved the neighborhood from future harassment. OP is basically a hero in my book. And now some comments from Reddit. The first one said, "This is exactly why every HOA needs clear limits on what individual board members can and cannot do. The problem is not always the rules themselves. Sometimes it is just one board person with too much free time and just enough fake authority to make everyone in the neighborhood miserable." The fact that the president immediately apologized tells me that she probably had a history and they were just waiting for one incident serious enough to finally remove her. And now we got another comment. This one said, "People sleep on how wild it actually is that she called the police over this. Like, she did not just call a non-emergency line, she actually called 911 and she tied up emergency dispatch because she could not look at your bathroom. There are people having heart attacks and she is basically reporting a paint can. The cops, this is a massive waste of resources, was him actually being extremely professional about this." And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this crazy story. And the next one is an interesting petty revenge story which is titled "Won't Speak to Me? Enjoy the Silence." So I once worked nights at a toxic place, UK supermarket food store, and was told I had to come in at least half an hour earlier than clocking in time and stay back a half hour after clocking off, which was all unpaid. No one liked me, no social interaction from anyone as they had formed their own little cliques already, and I was always given the worst tasks and I was always looked down upon because I questioned their extra working policy. Everyone was miserable, so why shouldn't I be? Well, anyway, after store closing and during cleaning and restocking, someone decided to bring a Bluetooth speaker and they were allowed to play music to lift the spirits and help the tedium pass. My next employment was starting the next week and I just planned on walking out, not letting them know of my intentions. The music did seem to lift the spirits a bit, but then I put my evil plan in place. So I got a friend to call the store manager at about 1 AM to complain, saying that he lived in one of the houses opposite and the music he could hear was keeping him awake and he couldn't sleep. Even describing the songs he heard that I had told him, the manager came down, relayed the complaint and told the staff that the music had to be turned down. Well, it was turned down and the music was now at a level that was barely audible. My friend called again, complained about the booming bass, still couldn't sleep, could still hear it, artist name I texted to him, threatening head office and police, etc. And my manager came out again, banning the radio. My last couple of shifts now in silence, misery restored. And the next one is an interesting story from r/Tales from Retail and is titled, "Sir, that is not a zero," and other things I did not think I would have to say out loud at work. So I work at a retail chain that sells a bit of everything, but the front end is mostly returns, online pickups, and people insisting that the app is broken because they cannot remember their own password. This happened last weekend during the after lunch rush when the line is long and everyone is already annoyed at the concept of waiting. A guy in his 50s comes up with a small box of fancy printer ink and slaps it on the counter like it personally offended him. He basically says he needs a refund because it does not fit, and when I ask for the receipt, he proudly holds up his phone with the screenshots and says, "I got the code." Cool, no problem, except the screenshot is a blurry zoom of an order number where half the characters are cut off, and I ask if he can pull up the full email so I can scan the barcode, and he gets this wounded look like I've asked him to solve a math problem. He starts reading the number to me very slowly, like I'm the one struggling. It is something like 80107B, but he keeps saying 80107B. I repeat it back and ask, is that an O or a 0? And he snaps, it's a 0 obviously, it's a number. I try it. System says invalid. I try it again, the same. He leans closer and says louder, 0, like 0, not a letter. Why would it be a letter? The line behind him is doing that shuffle where people pretend they are not listening, but they are, totally. I keep my voice calm and say, sometimes order codes have letters, can you tap the order and show me the barcode? He sighs like I'm wasting his valuable time and then scrolls dramatically and shows me the same screenshot again, just bigger now. That is when I see it clearly. It is not a 0, it's the letter O twice and the font just makes it look round. I point at it and say, as gently as I can, I think those are O's, not zeros. He goes red and says, no, I typed it, I know what I typed. So I do the only thing that works with this type of customer. I turn my screen slightly and say, okay, can you type it in for me then? I hand him the scanner keyboard and he pecks at it like it's contaminated, still muttering. He types 80107B with zeros, hits enter. Invalid. He stares at it, then at me, then at his phone like it betrayed him. I don't say anything, I just wait because sometimes silence is the safest customer service tool. He squints at his screenshot again and I watch his brain do the slow, painful recalculation and finally he says very quietly, fine, put O. I type it with O's, it pulls up instantly, and of course the return goes through. Instead of being relieved though, he pivots straight into blaming our system, saying we should make it clearer and not use confusing fonts, because it's basically a trick. I just nodded and said, I'll pass that along, because what else do you do? When I handed him the refund slip, he snatched it, and then right before walking away he said, not looking at me, you could have told me sooner. Like I didn't try, like I wasn't telling him the entire time. The next person in line stepped up and whispered, for what it's worth, it was totally an O. And I laughed a little harder than I meant to. And the next one is a petty revenge story which is titled Steal My Wheelie Bin, It's Gonna Cost You. So anyways, a while back I had an unknown neighbor that started putting their trash in my wheelie bin, aka garbage can. It started out as an extra bag here and there and eventually escalated to them hijacking the bin and it being at the other end of the alley. I was tired, pissed off after months of this. Now at this point, the bin is hijacked in someone's backyard. I'm sitting with a newborn and a bunch of poop-filled nappies I couldn't get rid of. And no, I didn't do what you were thinking, but I sure thought about it. So I waited patiently, unable to use my bin until collection day. Collection is about 9 AM. At 6 AM, I recover my beloved wheelie bin that they left out the night before. I removed every single bag of theirs and dumped them onto the sidewalk at the end of the alley where the bins go for collection, filled up mine with my own rubbish and went about my day. Walking back home in the afternoon, and to my delight, the offenders' bags have all been rebagged by the city in bright blue bags with the city council's logo and something along the lines of litter investigation evidence printed on them. I assume the city found a letter or something and they got a fine or at least a warning for it because my bin never got touched again, not even a Coke can. Fines here are £400 up to £2,500 for fly tipping. They could have forked out £25 for a new bin instead, but they chose violence, and I responded. And then someone in the comments mentioned, not all heroes wear capes, instead they save up dirty diapers. Thanks for watching, please check out my playlist on the left, and I will see you again tomorrow.